Up first is general business. Verification, the meeting has been properly posted.
It has.
Excellent, thank you very much. Next is opportunity for citizens to speak. Do we have anybody that would like to address the committee? Yes, sir. Step forward and be heard.
You can turn the mic on.
Did it work? Whoop.
As long as the red light's on, you're good.
Yeah,
Light's good? Okay. Is that working?
Yeah.
All right. Good evening. Thank you very much. Brian Fisher, Town Chairman, Town of Waukesha. Just a real quick update on Town of Waukesha Tax Incremental Financing District Number 1. I know that's downstream on your agenda. With me tonight, Christine DeMaster, who's been here previously with our consultant from Trilogy. We'll be happy to provide more detailed information at your agenda item if you wish it, but just a quick couple of process comments or update. You might recall we appeared before you at your Finance and Facilities Committee meeting on the 6th of January. At that point in time, we indicated a willingness or appropriateness to defer, to respect your wish to defer action on it because we had another public hearing coming up on this on the 9th of January, that following Thursday. That was our second public hearing, called for 3 reasons, none of which alone probably would have been a reason to hold a public hearing, but collectively they were, not in any particular order. The city of Waukesha asked us to hold another public hearing, so we agreed to accede to their request. The second thing on it is we did have a couple of corrections and modifications that we wanted to make to the plan. Legal counsel told us you don't have to hold another public hearing, but we thought it was a prudent thing to do. And the third thing, there was some misinformation, misrepresentations, which were about, and we wanted to have an opportunity to correct those. So we did have that public hearing, invited many people to be there, not unlike the first one, which actually spanned over 2 months. It was lightly attended. Not many people there to speak. Representative from the city expressed some concerns. Other than that, it was largely a non-event in terms of public participation. We did have, which had been scheduled prior to that, a meeting of the Joint Review Board, which Dr. Gray and others participated in. I believe that was on the 21st. And at that point in time, the Joint Review Board, we discussed some things, but basically took no action at that point in time, largely out of respect and deferential respect to you, so you would have the opportunity to review that information. We gave Dr. Gray and other members of the Joint Review Board a ring binder because a lot of this electronic communication just had been scattered all kinds of directions to the wind, amassed all that information in there. There are some things to supplement to that. Since then, obviously, the minutes of the meeting of the Joint Review Board on the 21st of January, as well as an additional communication from the city of Waukesha from Mayor Riley. I believe that's dated February 3rd. Some of you might have seen a copy of that. And the town did respond to that last week, and I think we tried to send some of those along to Mr. Clark, and I'm not sure whether those got disseminated to everybody. So that's really kind of a process thing. I guess I won't dive any deeper into that. We still simply contend at the end of the day that this meets all the appropriate criteria. We would ask that you thoughtfully consider all of that on its merits and its merits only, and we will be available to answer any questions or engage in further discussion when you get to that agenda item, if that's appropriate. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Any citizens that would like?
Hi, I'm Sandy Hom. I'm a resident of the town of Waukesha and a taxpayer to the school district. I just wanted to introduce myself because I had sent an email to a bunch of you and wanted to see you and let you see me, and if you get a chance to read my email. I know that maybe Brian said the meetings were not attended very well as far as support goes, but I've been to all the meetings and did support the TID at those meetings, and I encourage you to give it favorable consideration. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the committee? All righty, thank you very much for your comments. Moving on to action items. our first action item is the approval of minutes from the January 2020 meeting. Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Second by Mrs. Voigt. Any discussion? Corrections, concerns, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Moving on to our second action item, which would be the approval of vouchers. Sherry?
There was one question on vouchers this month, and it was for voucher 332763 to Alpine Valley Resort for $1,520. And it was just basically, what is this for? And you're going to be seeing a little bit more of this coming up because GASB, which is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, released an update that made changes to how we need to look at student activity accounts. And this required us to do yet another dive into our activity accounts and identify which ones are true student activity accounts. And we weren't left with a lot. So the accounts that didn't qualify to be true student activity accounts were moved to Fund 21. Fund 21, just as a general reminder, does not impact our general fund at all. It's not any of our funded money. Anything that's in Fund 21 is a gift, a grant, fundraising, or student payments for trips, things like that. And so now you'll be seeing a lot more of these type of payments because now we have to cut the checks out of district accounts versus the schools having their own accounts to cut them from. So this particular voucher is for the Saratoga Ski Club, and it was for 2 trips, included lift tickets, rentals, and meal vouchers.
Mr. Como?
I'm glad that was the explanation because I've been looking at these for years, right? And I'm like, why is this in here? I thought it was actually maybe miscategorized or it just kind of popped over somehow. So appreciate that. And one thing that we are for certain about is the government will make changes, and we will have to adapt to those changes. So
Absolutely. And when you look at the vouchers, it always has the account number. And so if it starts with a fund, if it starts with a 21, that's generally going to be these type of things. So if it's under Fund 10, then that's coming out of our education budget. And so,
thank you, Sherry.
welcome. That was it.
Okay. Is there any other questions regarding the vouchers? Alrighty. So, looking for a motion. Thank you very much. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Alrighty. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Alrighty. Moving on to our discussion/information items. First up is the Town of Waukesha Tax Increment Financing Number 1.
Yeah, the attached to your executive summary, this is, I think, our 3rd month in a row of having this agenda item, so I don't think I have to give a whole lot of background. But I did attach the latest documents that were sent to me the week of the 20th of January, so I think these are very close to the final.
Got some more today, so.
Yeah, I don't have those, but what you have attached to your document today is the meeting minutes from the Joint Review Board from January 21st. You have the response to the town regarding the 3rd revision of the proposed Town of Waukesha TID number 1 project plan. You have the tax incremental district draft project plan updated on the 26th of December of 2019. And the town of additional information regarding the provision of sanitary sewer and water service. All those we received after our meeting last month. So I believe this is very current, but I don't know if it's the latest version of documents based on what Todd received today. So hopefully that helps. So we're, not to speak for Todd, but we're looking for guidance on, not action, but just a consensus one way or the other, or feedback on the district's position related to this TIF.
Comment? Question? Wait?
I just wanted to thank
I appreciate that they have sent us the red line version to make it easier to see the changes as we've looked at this over 3 months. And it's hard to know what the changes were, so that makes it much easier to be able to work with the documentation. And actually a transcript of the meeting from the joint review, seeing all the questions that Todd asked and the answers he got, which really helps us to know, the feedback that he was getting in that research mode.
Any other comment? Yes, Corey.
I'd echo Ms. Voigt's comments as well. I did read the town's response to the mayor's Riley February 3rd letter, read that with great interest. I read the other submissions. I do thank Mr. Fisher and Christine for providing the red light versions of the 3 plans. I did read those as well. Those helped. And I guess I spoke rather extensively at previous meetings. I think a lot of us did, if not all of us did, so I won't repeat that. What I want to do is I want to get this right. I want to make sure what we're basing, or at least what I'm basing my position on, is what I'm supposed to base it on. To recap, I, in previous meetings, went outside of what was presented to me. I've researched whether that was appropriate. I'm confident that I was able to do that, so I stand by doing that. I know there's been some objections to that, but I stand by using everything available to me to form my opinion. But I did want to double check, based on what Attorney Macy said and Mr. Fisher said, as to what the rules are for what the JRB is. In, I think, the town's response to the February 3rd letter from the city, they cite the 3 items that the JRB is supposed to consider. I agree with the state statute that they cite, and I went through that myself. For direction and some instruction, I looked at the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. They actually have a booklet called the Tax Incremental Financing Manual. If you ever have an extra 5 hours, feel free to read it. But I went and looked at page 24 through 27, and for me it was rather instructive. It went through on page 26 a JRB decision criteria, and it cites those 3 sections, section 66.11 ad infinitum. Those 3 decision criteria, I think, is what Dr. Gray is going to use to guide his fact-finding basis of his decision or vote. Of those 3 are specifically development expected in the TID would occur without, let me start over. Development expected in the TID would occur without the use of the TIF. It's the but-for requirement. So when I look at that, I still am unclear as to what the specific developments are proposed in this TID. So I don't think that is the strongest argument for supporting this. The economic benefits of the TID, as measured by increased employment, business and personal income, and property value, are they sufficient to compensate for the cost of the improvements? The economic benefits, as listed in the most revised version of the draft project plan, are guesses. I know Ms. DeMasters talked about that being appropriate. I'll talk about this in a second. I don't think it's enough. And then I actually went to page 26 at the bottom. It says questions for the JRB to consider. And the first one is, would the expected development occur without the use of the TIF? I don't know what expected development with any particularity is being proposed. I know there's discussions about an elder, I forgot the exact words, but changing those residences to senior living, thank you, and some other projects. Will the development economic benefits compensate for the cost of improvements? I don't know what the cost of the improvements are. They're guesses. I think Table 4 in the most recent plan talks about being estimates. Fourth question, how does the planned development fit into the overall economic picture of the district? Again, I don't know exactly what the planned development is. There's too many mays. And then I know there was some discussion before about there doesn't need to be a guarantee that these improvements happen or that the developments happen at all. I agree with that, but one of the questions that the Department of Revenue itself lists is what guarantees are in place to ensure the development will occur as anticipated and the property value will increase as expected. There are 0 as far as I can tell in looking at this. I also went on, when looking at the actual revised, the final revision, the one dated December 26, 2019, I went through this And they don't have, so the town in here does not have a detailed cost estimate for the projects, the senior living, the stuff, or the anticipated with Storage Master, I believe. What they have is a detailed cost estimate for reconstruction and widening of Industrial Lane. They don't have anything else because I don't think we know what's going to happen or possibly happen. So that's the issue I have, is I don't know how I can, in good conscience, say this is a good thing for the district, that it benefits, and answer those questions that I just went through without knowing that. So I'm not picking on the town. I've said this before. I don't have any dog in the hunt. I don't have any individual personal opinion of whether the town incorporates or not. It's not my role. I just don't think it's going to pass those three questions. So I'm not going to repeat what I said before. Nothing I've seen since the last meeting has changed my mind. So I'll defer to everybody else on that.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, I do share your concerns, Corey. I would probably echo just about everything you had to say there. Some of the TIFs that I've worked on before, one of the major differences, and Mr. Masters pointed this out, is that there is no like major cornerstone developer or a developer that's coming up with a, like, here is the cornerstone of this TID. And I struggle a little bit with that. And there's these little pockets and smaller projects. And that's why I think, it's all projections. And actually, the economic side of any TID that's put forth or TIF that is put forth, they are all projections. But one of the things that helps us to get past that is knowing that there is a serious project that could be coming forth. And I had asked at, I think, 2 meetings ago, maybe it was the last meeting, what are some of the discussions that were occurring? It would be nice to have more details on those discussions. The other thing that I'd like to just briefly talk about deals with the city's concerns. And I have had some people say, oh, you don't need to take the city's concerns into consideration. Well, we represent not only the city, but other municipalities as a school district of Waukesha. So we do have to take all of our constituents' concerns into consideration. And I do appreciate the detail rebuttals that were provided on the city comments. But I'm just wondering if there has been any attempt on the town's part to come to the city and try and work through some of these things. My suggestion would be to slow down and to try and work through those things, because I think it's important I don't really know, who to believe in terms of some of those concerns, the city or the town. I mean, I just don't know. And it would be nice to see if there could be some consensus between those two entities before we got going on this. And then going back to the but-for, I'm not sure. I mean, there is some development that has occurred in this area over the last couple decades. Without the TIF, was it very much? It might not have been a lot, but would it occur without it? I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence on that one. So I'd like to see a little bit more convincing too, like Corey had pointed out there. And I don't know if Mr. Gray has had any, you've been at each of the meetings. Have any details come up on, some of the discussions on the developers and what those development agreements might look like, or what level they've taken those discussions to?
Yeah, at this point, I haven't seen any developer agreements, but there have been discussions about what they would like to see or what could be potentially proposed there. I did, and I think some of the things that you've discussed, Mr. Como, are very good. I did talk to Town of Vernon, the clerk there, because they recently went through a similar type of TIF district, but obviously they're connected to the city of Mukwonago. And she said, well, their TIF was a little bit different than what they were doing. Plus, they also had some border agreements in place between city of Mukwonago and Town of Vernon and some of the other municipalities here. And, you know, I don't know if that's doable, if it's appropriate, but I think it would answer a lot of questions, and I think it would, you know, right now we're in the tough spot of trying to figure out which of our constituents we want to upset, I guess, if you want to call it that way, and that's a tough situation to be in. So I don't know if there is any possibility for that kind of work, or at least an opportunity for maybe myself to meet with town and city folks and see, you know, where the issues are. Regardless of all the other things here, like I said, it really puts, I think, the district and myself in a tough spot, because, you know, we are in between a conflict between two of our primary constituents. So I would like to have something that gets resolved to everyone's favor when it comes time to vote on this.
And that's why I was suggesting maybe the town reach out to the city on some discussion there to get a higher level of comfort. I know if I was a developer and I saw this kind of conversation going on, I'd be putting up a big question mark, like, do I really want to even try and pursue this? They probably wouldn't put, you know, any skin in the game until they had an answer for sure anyways. So, but I would think that it would be more attractive if some of these, the TIF would be more attractive if some of these things were kind of determined ahead of time and put to rest ahead of time. Because we want to see this to be success. We want this to be successful. If this is going to go forward, we want it to work, and we want it to see the tax increments actually occur. That's just kind of where my thoughts are at.
I hit one.
No, there probably won't be any responses. So we're not discussing it with.
What I would suggest is that maybe these things are brought back to the Joint Review Board and have the Joint Review Board have this discussion. I think it could be healthy for the JRB. That's only one opinion, but
Well, yeah, the discussion's going to have to be had at some time.
right.
And that would probably be the best venue to do it, Mr.
If I may, thank
Yes.
you. I had one point I anticipated making, and I completely blew it the first time. So let me circle back a little bit. I looked at what required information the JRB should be provided. And it's a list of 5 things. I won't go through it. But it also talks about additional information the JRB may request. A detailed list of project costs. We have that just on the industrial lane. We do not have a detailed list of project costs for the other anticipated developments. So I can't opine on it. You can also request, the JRB can also request signed development agreements. We don't have those. They can also request an economic feasibility study. I think page 27 or so has the town's proposed economic feasibility study. I don't know if that's exactly what they're talking about there, because I don't know if I'd rely on the applicant to do their own economic feasibility study. And I read it, and basically says it'll work because we say it'll work. Not to insult their plan, but that's how I read it. So I don't think, well, I'm just piling on my previous argument,
Yeah,
but
no, I understand.
I don't think we're outside the scope of what we're supposed to be looking at, is my major point. If we had signed development agreements, we could say this is going to, in our opinion, be a positive thing for the district or not. So I think, at least for me, right or wrong, and I'll hang or live by it, but I can't make a decision on incomplete information. So my vote's going to be no, if we're going to voting, but.
We're not
yes, okay.
We're just giving a feel.
Okay, so my feel is no.
Okay. No, I totally understand. And I understand what you're saying about the signed agreements. However, that on a lot of TIFs, that doesn't happen. We've had a lot of TIFs in Waukesha where it didn't happen, and the TIF didn't go through. It was either closed up because nothing happened, or was absorbed into a different TIF, and that's happened. I mean, we're sitting in one right now. I don't even know if this one's still, is this still going? Are we still in it? Yeah, I mean, and there was that went, and I don't really know what the agreement was. Sobelman's, couldn't tell you. So I totally understand what you're saying about that. However, for me, that's really not a threshold because the city has done that in the past. The problem that I have is the development, the senior living development. If there was somebody who was putting senior living there, it'd be a done deal already because it's going up everywhere. Where I work in Oconomowoc, one just went up in a year. It's enormous. It's probably got to be at least 500 units. And it went up in a year. Those agreements were signed within, I want to say, a month. So the lack of agreements does make me nervous as well. Just like it makes me nervous when the city of Waukesha didn't have anything in some of theirs. So, and I believe that the lack of documentation about the improvements to Sunset, there probably is not going to need to be any. The traffic flows are fine for senior living, and I think that's why. The street that really needs to be fixed in the town is industrial, because there's a lot of cleanup on both sides. So that's where the money would definitely be spent. So in my mind, either way, I'm fine with. If the TIF doesn't go through, then the TIF doesn't go through. If it gets shot down at the Joint Review Board, it gets shot down. If it goes, it goes. Because either way, the district's really not going to be harmed by if it passes or if it doesn't. I think that, unfortunately, the town's a little late in the game. It seems to be rushed, but it's being rushed because it has to. It's done in June, right? That's when the law sunsets.
Exact date, but I believe
And Tony Evers is not going to keep it going. So he's already said it's not going to happen. So the way that I look at it is, I agree with Corey. I'd love to see some signed agreements. I don't think we're going to, just because of what Joe said, because this whole thing's up in the air and it's got to be rushed. So if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's the way I look at it. There's a whole bunch of people voting on this board. 5? Is there 5 members? Yes. Yeah, so. Yes.
And that's why I think it's important to bring some of these things back to the JRB to start to get the county and WCTC into the fold of this discussion.
Better believe it.
I'm not sure where, what their comments have been. They looked.
Would you like to put together a simple list of the things that you'd like the JRB to address, or do you want us to glean that from the meeting here, or watching the recording of it? What would your preference be? JRB meets on the 18th of February.
It's a Tuesday. Yeah.
I think Todd can represent us and bring those forth and say, these are the things that we had discussed at our committee meeting. These are the things that we'd like to present to the Joint Review Board, and then have him formally present it to the JRB. I mean, we still have these meetings are all recorded, so links could be provided to any of our committee meetings. You just go out to our website and you'll get to our YouTube channel, and then they can look at all. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
I mean, I guess the question I have is, Todd, has any of this been brought up at any of the other entities? Has like the county said, hey, where's the agreements?
some things I'd have to go back and look through all my notes, so.
Okay.
A lot of it's here, so this is my,
There's your binder.
this is my reading, so I'm gonna go home tonight and start reading this, and I probably won't be back till Friday, but, it's a lot to read. Some of the new information might be in there as well. Like I said, I just got a new packet today,
Right.
So I'm going to try to get through as much as I can.
Okay. Sure.
And sometimes this just takes time. Joint review, this isn't the first joint review board that has had more than 2 meetings. And some of them actually kind of go out longer periods of time because some studies need to be done. You know, the Brookfield one took 2 years. I know the city has, you know, they attempted the baseball, you know, amending TID 14 and then creating TID 26, and then it just kind of fizzled. But sometimes it takes time, is my point.
Right,
it
for
takes
sure.
time because there are questions, and those questions, you know, as they're answered, either bring comfort levels up or down. And I think what you're hearing is we still just have questions.
Any other comments? So I guess that, you know, you can look at the transcripts or the YouTube, but I mean, some of the questions that I would have would be, why Industrial Drive? I mean, I know what's on Industrial Drive, and I can imagine why, but I mean, why Industrial Drive? And how far are you off from getting a signed agreement to rip down those houses and put up senior living? Those are probably the 2 most important things that will need to be answered for the TIF. I mean, you know, those are the 2 questions that we had here. Is there signed agreements? And why is there no improvements to Sunset? I mean, my average, I think that there doesn't need to be many improvements to Sunset, so the improvements are going to industrial, but that might be counterintuitive to the developments that we have talked about, because Service Master or Storage Master isn't anywhere near industrial. And unless we're going to rip down some manufacturing facilities, the senior housing won't be going on industrial either, and cleaning up a bulk storage oil facility. So that would be the questions I think that I would have for sure that I would need answered if I was on the joint review board, for sure. Any other discussion? Alrighty.
I guess,
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, I guess a procedural question.
Yeah.
If the JRB does vote at the next meeting and Dr. Gray is going to vote, and we don't, this is not an action item, it's a discussion item, how does he get direction from this committee besides, because I think 3 of us spoke. I don't know how that's supposed to work.
Yes.
Well, this is how we've done it in the past. We've never taken a formal vote as a committee. We've always just presented our guidance.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's really the JRB, our representative, he will vote the way he believes he ought to vote based upon the discussion that.
And information that he gets.
Yes, and there could be more information at the meeting that, you know, adds to that decision-making, and our representative has the ability to make that decision on his or her own.
Okay.
This is just for guidance,
Yeah.
And that's the way we've done it, you know, in the past. And you don't know if there's going to be a motion that's going to be brought forth at the JRB. That's why we have to be fluid with our representative, because the representative's in the moment. We don't know if there's going to be a motion made or not, and if there is, when that's going to be taking place or a vote. So
Makes sense to me.
Yeah,
Thank
just
you.
so you know,
Okay.
it was, you know, we had talked about it being an action item.
Yeah.
At the work session, or whenever that was. I decided not to, because if we vote to have Todd vote no, and then something comes up, all of a sudden there's a signed agreement, or God knows what happens before the meeting, he's bound
yeah,
that we said you're voting no matter what. So if anything pops up, and he just got another binder, you know, more information today. So that's why I decided not to have it as a concrete action item.
Okay,
Just
that makes sense.
Just
I
because
support
things
that.
happen, and like Joe said, it is a fluid motion, and we've been getting more and more information all the time. So I just didn't want to have Todd locked into a yes or a no.
and that's how we have
Right.
done things in the past, and that's really our policy guides us on this. Our policy does not require us to actually take a vote. it just requires us to provide guidance.
Okay.
And this has been the format that we've done it in for a long time.
Okay. And I'm not complaining, I'm just
Yeah, no,
seeking guidance. So I agree.
just-
I think it
just
makes
wanted to
sense.
explain it to the committee why it's not, because I know that we had talked about it, that
Okay.
it was discussed, and maybe we should be.
And if this process
on
doesn't
it.
work, we change our
Yeah.
processes in,
Right.
in the
Fair
future.
enough. Thank you.
But I agree. It's, how does Todd get his direction? So for me, it's, at the time, whatever Todd feels is the most appropriate action for the school district of Waukesha, I would be fine with him voting whatever direction that is.
Likewise.
If it's for or against. So for my guidance to Mr. Gray is his discretion. I trust. So I don't know if anybody else has that opinion, but if you do, you can let us know. Mrs. Voigt.
I agree that we
Thank you.
do want to give,
Yeah.
Superintendent Gray the discretion to make a decision. I appreciate Mr. Monteo's research that you did and bringing the statute kind of expectations and the guidebook, whatever, kind of expectations that indeed the Joint Review Board can look at those questions and answer those questions to make a better decision.
Right. Excellent. Mr. Como.
And I'm actually encouraging more due diligence by the JRB. So I really haven't voiced an opinion. But again, it's fluid. So I have a lot of questions right now, as you saw. So
More discussion. Does anybody add anything? Alrighty. Great discussion. Thank you very much. Moving on, up next is our 18-19 audit report.
Yes,
Look forward to these every
Every
single year.
every year the district is
I thought it would be
required
at the
to
last
have
meeting, and it wasn't, so I was really disappointed. I went home sad.
Well, every year we're required to have an audit of our financial statements, and this evening we have Amber Drwisky and Dave Macau here from our audit firm CLA
Welcome.
to have a discussion. I told them basically just to give an overview and tell you how wonderful we are, but that's right, that's right.
as a
But
whole?
please feel free to ask questions as they go along, and any particular items you would like them to cover in the audit, please just let them know. And I will then get the red light on, so you're good.
So good evening. Both me and Amber worked on the audit of the district, and so you should have a annual financial report and a summary of the results of the audit. I'm going to turn it over to Amber to kind of walk you through both of these documents. Amber is the one that's here on site throughout the audit. I'm also show up, but Amber really kind of goes through the day-to-day operations of the audit. So I'm going to turn it over to Amber, and certainly any questions, as Sherry indicated, that you want to ask us, feel free, and we can go from there. So Amber.
Thank you. I'm going to start with the bound financial report that you would have received, the bigger document. On page 1, this is our independent auditor's report, really what you all want to know about in here. So we audited the accompanying financial statements for the school district of Waukesha as of for the year ended June 30th, 2019. Management takes responsibility for the numbers, the financials in this bound document. And we issue an opinion on the numbers in the document. At the bottom, we have issued what we call a clean, unmodified opinion. So in all material respects, this document represents the accurate financial position of the district as of June 30th of 2019. Then I'm going to kind of skip over to page 17 through 19. These are what we call your government-wide financials. This has all of your current and long-term obligations and assets. So this would include all of your capital assets, any debt that the school district has, and then, as you can see, so there's some large numbers in regards to the Wisconsin retirement system, pension asset and liability. It was in an asset position in 2018. It is now in a liability position. That is a non-cash item for the district. It is just your proportionate share of the Wisconsin retirement system. There are corresponding deferred inflows and outflows that get kind of confusing, but those are the big numbers. All of that is provided to us from an actuarial study done at the state level. So then we record that in the district's books. But those are large numbers, so just want to point that out. As you can see, your cash balance increased significantly. A lot of that is primarily your referendum dollars that came in. So there's about $45 million of bond proceeds in there. As you can see towards the middle of the page, your debt also increased as a result of that. Accounts payable, that's probably the other big item that has changed here, and that's primarily due to some timing of some transportation bills and your capital projects towards the end of the year, a little bit of timing.
I have a question. On the net position, what would constitute a net investment in capital assets? What are capital assets, buildings or everything?
Everything.
Everything?
Buildings,
Every
your
physical object?
land,
Okay.
your machinery and equipment, any vehicles, any large furniture purchases,
Yes.
that type of things.
Okay.
Yep, and that is net of the debt that would have been issued on that, and then
Okay.
your bond proceeds that have been unspent are not included in that.
Awesome, thank you.
Then on page 20, 20 through 23, this is really the operations of the district. So what I want to kind of focus on here is your fund balances, about towards the bottom half of the page here. Your policy states that you should have a fund balance, unassigned fund balance of about 10 to 15% of subsequent year's expenditures. Currently, you are at about 21%. So healthy, and you also have an additional 3.7 million that is assigned for future retirement obligations, and that was from your OPEB settlement from a couple years ago. So you have some flexibility there and some healthy fund balance, and that's just in your general fund where we kind of look at that, because generally your capital projects, you're issuing debt for those types of items, and you're going to spend that down. You do have some remaining fund balance in some old capital projects such as the capital expansion, and then you've put some money aside in your long-term capital improvement fund, Fund 46, that there's a timetable before you can kind of pull some of that money out in that fund. But so you have some additional funds set aside for those types of capital projects aside from your referendum.
How close are we to being able to tap into Fund 46? It was a 5 year.
May of 21.
Yep.
So we're getting there.
Oh, so a year.
Now it's going
Little bit over a year.
fast.
It's a good and a bad thing.
Your general fund, if you flip to page 22, your general fund had a positive change in fund balance of $1.5 million approximately. Most of that came from some additional open enrollment money that came through, and some additional school-based services funding that is kind of unpredictable. When you get that for prior years, that goes into the general fund because of the way that the special education fund gets closed out. So that was some timing issues from that perspective. But there's a budget to actual for the general fund and the special education fund on page 49 and 50. Because those are combined on the front, but they are separated on page 49 and 50 from a budgetary perspective. As you can see on page 49, your instruction was under budget, but your support services was over budget, which kind of offset each other within about $20,000. So that helped that bottom line in the general fund. And that 1.5 that was a surplus was projected to be about a $600,000 deficit from your budget perspective. Any questions on that?
The other thing, I think I have this straight in my head, so correct me if I have it wrong, that on page 22, that $1.45 million change in fund balance, that also gets into our site carryover.
Yes.
That we have every year, which has been going on. You know, if schools don't spend all their money, we allow them to carry those dollars forward. And I forget what that total is, but it's, I want to say like 350, $400,000. So a large piece of that, it's not a net gain of, there's a practice, at least a procedure that we utilize every year that's part of that calculation too, so.
I just want to, since you touched on this a little earlier, on page 25, these are your fiduciary funds, 25 and 26. And the question that was asked, that was a very observant question, and definitely going to be some more of that. You have your pupil activity agency fund. You will start to see some changes in that in 1920 from even a reporting standpoint. You will now see the revenues and expenses, ins and outs on this report. Due to a GASB change, so. Correct.
Turn your mic on.
You'll see a reduction in the amounts at the next audit because those amounts are coming out of the student activity accounts, which are separate bank accounts, and moving into Fund 21, which is all accounted for in our audit.
So we're managing it as a
Be
district?
managing it.
Yes, gotcha.
Mhm. Correct.
What was driving the government change? Or the change in this particular?
It's primarily twofold. One, people were recording things through an agency fund that really the district or governments had some involvement, that they're really more active involvement. So GASB 84 set some thresholds of direct involvement. So only things that are really, really agency perspective. So it really hit a lot of the school districts because your pupil activity funds generally has student advisors and faculty, teacher advisors that are really active in managing some of that. So most of what DPI expects is it will go into Fund 21 like you're seeing because of that. So the first focus was to say, let's get accountability. So what is going through here? If you go to page 59, you can see end of the year with 675,000. But what actually hit? You're spending about 2.6 million goes in and out of those accounts. Never was showing up in an operating statement. Accountability and transparency says if the district controls it, we should see it in an operating statement. That was the primary focus of it. Then, with any standard, it's just to get clarification because other governments were interpreting things.
So if we actually turn those funds over to each of the individual schools, that would not need to be reported?
It would need to be.
Even greater.
The level of
Okay.
involvement by employees here at the district that's really
Okay.
driving that.
Okay.
The two things that we looked at when reviewing it were, the clubs need to now have mission statements driven by the students, that the students come in, create a mission statement every year, and then that it includes where their revenue's coming from, where are their expenses, what are they looking to do with that money? And then, does the advisor have any say? Can they dictate what's going to be done with that money? Can they come in and tell the students, we're going to do this now? Or do the students have full accountability to make the decisions with the funds? We have very few clubs where the advisors aren't saying, well, here, we're going to do this with this, or we're raising money to buy new weight room equipment or whatever. So those funds had to come out of being considered student activity. And to manage, we talked to the athletic directors about it and the activity directors, and they all felt to manage to that level where the students had to do mission statements and review them every year was going to be problematic.
And this is not a change that just popped up. I mean, we've been talking about cleaning up Fund
Yeah.
60
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
I want to say a decade. Maybe I don't think I'm way off if I'm off.
And you guys
us,
made a
right?
big
Gives
step
us
when you
an
closed your
excuse.
elementary.
And I have to do a shout out to Sherry and Amy Holly in my office because not only it's easy for us to change the accounting part of that, but the cultural shift from these staff members who had pretty much direct access and not a lot of oversight was a leap. And if you recall, we started with eliminating elementary student activity accounts, and then we went to the middle school, and then obviously the high schools are the biggest players in this because of all the different groups. So it was at least a 3-4 year process to get to, and it just kind of fell in line with the standard. So I don't know if we can say we knew it was coming this year, but it worked out well, so.
Any questions on any more of that, or I'm going to go to the stapled document? So there should have been a stapled document in with the bound document. This is an executive summary of kind of all the opinions and reports that we have within the bound document. So on page 1, there is a summary of our audit opinion, the clean unmodified report that I mentioned. Then in addition, we review internal controls. We don't express an opinion on that, but we do provide suggestions to the finance department or to the schools, because we do go out and visit those schools every year. So we provide suggestions to that. This year we didn't have any that we disclosed in here, but we did go through some with Sherry and her team, and they made some changes during that period of time. So there's no deficiencies that we report in internal control. And no deficiencies in internal control over compliance that we noted. So no compliance findings. And then the other report that we have is, because the district receives over $750,000 in federal funds, you're required to have a federal single audit or compliance audit. So as part of that, we reviewed major programs, federal major programs. We do that on a rotational basis, and we did not have any findings in any of those programs or with the compliance of those programs as well. So those were all good.
How many years does it take you to go through the rotation?
It depends, because we also have a percentage threshold. So when the dollars change, from one grant your Title I grant or your school-based services jumped up this year, then our percentages change. So we may have to test more programs, and this year so happened that we were short on some, so we had to test some additional programs. So it can be anywhere from a 3 to 4 or 5 year cycle. Typically if they're over 750,000, we're testing them once every 3 years. So, but at the smaller programs, they come into play when we're trying to get our percentages that we're required to hit, so.
And our two big ones are our title program and our IDEA flow-through program.
Correct. On page 2, this just talks about some accounting estimates that are incorporated into the financial audit, and those are your useful lives of your depreciable capital assets, your other post-employment benefits, your net pension asset and liability with the Wisconsin retirement system, and your self-insurance, IBNR, and then you have some fair values with your investments through WISC. So on the bottom of page 3, we didn't have any difficulties with management, and on page 4, no disagreements. They're great to work with, very helpful. No complaints there.
She said it just like you said she was going to say it.
She stopped
Very
me in the
heartfelt.
hallway. Page 6 again gives a summary of our internal controls that we did not have identify any deficiencies. On page 9 through, I believe, 12, these are some upcoming GASB standards that the district, that may pertain to the district, that kind of like a GASB 84, we always put in a little blurb a couple years before it becomes effective, and these are some of them that would be, that the district would apply, that it would apply for them. So just some informational data for your reading pleasure. Some might enjoy it, some might not. And then the back pages is the management representation letter that the district takes responsibility for the financial audit.
And like Amber said, if you go through it, the audit from our perspective went very efficiently and within the timelines that we anticipated the audit. So obviously that's due to the staff here at the district. So, and it's more than just the financial people, especially when we get into the programs or we look at the people activity funds and look at different areas within the district. Everyone was certainly supportive of us being able to complete the audit, and we do appreciate that.
I'd like to just add that this was the first year that the auditors, we were formerly with Schenck, and then they merged with CLA, and so it was interesting to see their process changes and come in and look at it, and sometimes in a different perspective, and look at our processes a little bit different than I think we have in the past. I don't know if that's fair to say, but it seemed to be documentation.
Anything that stood out? An example you could give us?
I don't have an exact example, but just the depth of the questionnaires, of the detail of our processes and like our IT
Was greater or was
security.
less?
Greater. We joked about our auditor Casey. Be like, oh no, Casey's coming. Because she did have questionnaires that were quite in-depth and regarding to our processes of cash handling and IT and security, all sorts of things that really made us think a little bit more about our processes and looking for ways to improve them. And one example is having sign-off. I do all the transfers of money within the district, and Amy Holly does the reconciliation of our monthly statements, so there's that cross balance there, but now we're also having Darren look at what I'm signing off and transferring, and he's signing off on it, so that there's a third eye in there now, and that's a process change that we've made.
Well, that has been, so in the past, we've had internal controls and processes pointed out where our auditors have said, hey, we need to really work on improving certain things, and we've had over several years been pointed out that we have a small staff. For this size organization, we have a very small administrative staff, and one of the downsides of a small administrative staff is being able to cross-check things and make sure you have your checks and balances in place. So you just gave an example of how we improved over the years, where I believe, I don't know, a handful of years ago, that was a concern. And whether I don't remember which auditor brought it up, but it's good to know that the depth of questioning has increased. And hats off to you for, having that, those processes put in place. And from a board perspective, this might not be the most exciting topic for people to listen to, but it probably is the most important task that we oversee, is making sure that the books are what they say they are, and we depend on the professionals to make sure that the finances are in line. So, this may seem like routine or whatever, and just I think it's taken a lot of years to be at the level that we're at, and that's a tip of the hat to you guys. But you have to prove yourself each and every year, because things change and things can go wrong and so on and so forth. So, but
Can I just give a quick shout out to our district accountant, Amy Holly, because she is incredible and makes my job easy every day because of what she does. And I think you guys will attest to the fact that working with Amy is pretty incredible. So I would just like to get her name out there too and recognized for the great work she does all year long on our financials, but also during our audit.
Speaking, just to follow up on Joe's comments, this audit's really the board's audit. We already know where we stand or where we think we are, but this is your oversight, and ultimately it's shared on the district website. We keep 3 years out there for anyone who might be interested in reading it, and I'm sure there's some CPAs out there that maybe take a peek at it on occasion. The only other thing, I was going to say Shank, sorry. CLAs, I'll get there. They're an asset throughout the school year. I'll call Amber and say, Amber, we're thinking of doing this, and how does this work, or what's a journal entry supposed to look like? So we access them throughout the year, some years more than others, but it's an ongoing dialogue. And then lastly, I just want to touch on these GASB changes, and we kind of joke about government always needing to be proving their worth, I guess. One thing to keep in mind with GASB, especially the actuarial reduction in our our OPEB liability is a perfect example. We like to look back historically and how have we done, but keep in mind there's been rule changes throughout that decade or 15 years. I think the trend would hold true, but to say that you're comparing apples to apples across these GASB standards over time, I think it can get a little shaky. So just, again, is the trend probably true in that example? Probably, that it's gone down significantly, but it's a different animal every year or every other year. So just keep that in mind as we look back.
Ms. Matteo.
Thank you. I think it's very tempting, at least for me as a board member, to look for problems to solve. And problems that are presented to us, we say, okay, how do we fix this? And then when we get, or I get good news, it's very tempting, and it's a laziness in me where I say, great job, thanks. But I echo Mr. Como's comments. This is the most important part of, I think, the board's aspect. If this isn't done right, we can't do anything else. If our numbers are wrong, we can't rely on them, and we can't have a budget, and we can't do the things that we need to do for our students and our constituents. So I'd be remiss if I didn't say this is exactly what I wanted to see as a board member. We rely on you professionals to do your job and do it exceptionally well. You have an impossible task. You can't get it wrong. You just can't. Of these thousands of things that took you to make to do what you have to do, you just can't get it wrong. Then we hire extra expert professionals to check your work. That's a hard thing. That's unique to your profession. Most professions don't have that. So everything I'm seeing checks out. So as much time as I spend on pointing out problems and trying to solve them, I want to spend as much time saying, good work. You know, to have an audit from an independent auditor who works well with the district come in and say, I haven't read this in detail, there's no need for changes, is astounding. So that's good news. So thank you.
Any other comments? Alrighty.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
It's good to see you guys. I'm staying tonight.
So now I don't have to sleep with this under my pillow every night?
Want to?
It worked.
Again, if you ever want to access it when you have a spare moment, it is on the website.
Oh,
And
yeah.
for anyone who's listening, it will be on, I think it's already out there, but it'll be out there soon if it's not, so.
It's not, I just noticed that.
Oh, we usually wait till the board sees it before we pull it out.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Next up is the referendum project update.
Yeah, we had originally hoped to have bid results for you on the work that's going to be done at the three middle schools and at South High School. But if you recall, last month, we mentioned that we bumped back a week to give potential respondents more time to, because it's a lot of work to give, and we think the downside of that is we just got it all back today, and we had a conference call on it this morning. So I can tell you that the preliminary review of the bid results looks promising. We'll be doing some final vetting over the next couple of weeks. So we plan to come back next month and walk you through where we've been in terms of our projections and where the final bids are coming out. So it's not unusual to go through the bid results, and we had for the big packages, because obviously it's a competitive environment out there to get the trades and firms lined up. We seem to have gotten a good response. So the report I'll bring back to you in March, we'll talk about how many respondents we had. Is there any local companies that are involved? Because I think that's good general knowledge for board members to have. And then how are we doing budget-wise, and where are we overall? So next month I'll have Bray, Findorf, and our owner's rep, Kurt Wiebelhaus, more than likely will join us to go over in detail. And again, if it wouldn't have been for that week bump, we'd be talking about it tonight. So again, everything's looking good. I think we'll be under budget from what we anticipated. So we'll start releasing contracts to lock in those vendors, and then come back with a full report in a few weeks.
So when are you anticipating we're going to actually sign the contracts?
Next couple of weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to. In a normal environment, whatever normal is, you maybe could wait till the next meeting, but
Right.
in this
No, I was
environment.
just wondering. No, you got to grab them because the competition is actually other projects is the major competition.
Yeah, and
right
the
now.
biggest competitor we had that we were pretty familiar with was Wauwatosa. If you remember, they $100 and some million. We got out sooner, but the turnaround for them was quicker.
We might be in competition with Milwaukee.
So we decided to give our bidders more time rather than try to move ours, because ours is more complex and more sites. Again, based on the conversation I had this morning, I think we did all right.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any questions? Of Karen? No? Alrighty. Moving on to the next referendum update, summer 2019.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide you a kind of a closing report on how we did in last summer's work. If you recall, we did 11 secure entrances district-wide, primarily at the elementary level. So if you look at the back page, it's we track these things by different categories. So I thought it was a good summary of where we've been. Sometimes we budget in more detail, and then when you start getting the invoices, they aren't broken out. So you see in above a lot in that right-hand column. But we came in under budget by $266,000 on those projects. And I think I haven't heard any issues with the projects as of now. So we had some growing pains early on with the new traffic pattern and everything. But I thought I'd bring you one closing report, and then again next month you'll get to see for the next 2 summers a budget column, and then we'll fill in actuals as we learn about it, and then we'll eventually have a final report in the fall of '21 on the 3 middle schools and South High School. I should also add that we still have 3 elementary schools to bring secure entrances to. And we are actually starting that planning phase for those schools right now. When that work will exactly take place, we're not sure. One of the schools has an enrollment level where maybe we can do some work during the school year and kind of isolate it. Hawthorne, we had a lot of discussions about bringing accessibility to that site. So we'll be bringing that back. We'll probably get into design budgeting in May, June, so maybe midsummer, kind of finalizing a scope of work to take place at those 3 schools. So that's where we stand as of today related to the referendum. Is there any questions?
That's going to be all the work is at the schools, right? Because there's more than just a secure entrance. Like at Hawthorne, we were talking about a elevator, weren't they?
Yeah, Hawthorne, we talked about accessibility. I believe there's 5 different levels
Yes.
in a school that looks like a
Single story.
bi-level or tri-level at best. And accessibility is an issue at several of our schools, but an elevator was part of those discussions. I think there was the board never took action on it, but I think there was a sentiment that because of the street it was on and the green space, that Hawthorne is a long-term site for us. And so we started talking about the elevator. The secure entrance, like all the schools, can be as simple as putting a door in a wall or actually bringing a front entrance to Hawthorne. If you drive around Hawthorne, really doesn't have anything that draws you to the school. And then if you go down the lower grade wing, there's steps, and then they had to throw 3 more steps in at heaven forbid they brought some fill in. And those types of things. And how far do you go with that? Because we have those issues at several of our schools. But the board at that time, but that also, the funding was fund balance for the elevator in particular. And I believe we talked about $750,000 to $1 million of fund balance to be used at Hawthorne to bring it up to a good level in terms of improvements. So all the funding, even on the one you just saw, has been partnerships between referendum dollars and district dollars. And Hawthorne in particular was district dollar heavy. So we'll have those discussions in summer.
Any other questions about the 2019? No? Alrighty. So the last piece of business for discussion information items is the monthly budget report.
Okay. In January, we received the first of our tax payments, and in February, we'll get another good chunk. But I noted on here that we received 27% of our general fund this year compared to last year, but that's a little misleading because the way we settle our tax money, the January payment first goes to settle our Fund 41 levy. So we put all the money that is needed into Fund 41, and then anything left over goes into Fund 10. And then in February, we first satisfy our debt service. So our levy money goes first into our debt service account, and then anything left goes into Fund 10. Well, our debt service levy this year is quite a bit larger. So the amount that we received in January our overall taxes, our levy was higher, so it does make it look like it's a much higher amount, but in February, it'll just be offset by a smaller amount. But overall, our overall taxes, we received 53% of our taxes compared to 54% last year, so very close in line to what we normally get. Our other things to note for revenue, we received our main transportation aid payment. It looks a little low if you compare to budget, but we always get a final reconciliation in June, which should make up that difference. We received our educator effectiveness grant payment. That one is kind of an in and out every year because we have to pay for this software that DPI we have to pay DPI for this software that they in turn around and pay us back for. So it's an interesting accounting move on their part. Federal sources, we received Title I and II claim payments in January. Other than that, we did have a rather large amount, $182,000 in refund of prior year expenses, and that was from our workers' comp audit. We had a nice surprise in a rebate from our insurance company for workers' comp, so that was nice. Overall, we're at 45% of our revenue collected compared to 41% last year. For expenditures, salaries and benefits always our largest. Salaries are right in line with where we expect them to be. Benefits overall are in line, but we're keeping an eye on health insurance because it seems to be running just a little bit higher when we look at the budget amounts, but our WRS is running lower. So just a budgeting thing that we're watching, and at the end of the year, we expect it to wash out, though, and come in overall our budget. Purchase services, our largest spend is for, that should say personal services. And there are things like our student transportation. In January, we had finally catch up for student on our transportation, so some rather large payments to First Student in January, and then our normal tuition payments for Montessori and our 4K partners. And then a bit for asbestos and mold abatement at some of our sites that went on during the holiday break while schools weren't in session. To get that done, did you want to speak on that?
Part of the construction, it was planned,
Oh, yes,
just so
sorry.
people don't think it
Yeah.
Yes,
was a random event.
no.
Outbreak.
Capital objects, we actually had credits in there this month, and that was mainly from the sale of old MacBooks. We had no debt retirement from the general account in January. Insurance, our insurance is showing, it's looking over budget, but there's two things that happened. One is that we had a payment from last year that got booked a little late and is showing up in this year, but also the main reason is because of the Summit View situation where we have to take the revenue that we receive from the insurance agent, insurance company, and put it into a revenue account, but the expenditures are coming out of the insurance account. So it's looking like it's way over budget, but it really isn't because we have revenues to offset that. And we've talked about that. No transfers made yet this year. Other objects, there were credits, and that was mainly every month the district pays some things on behalf of the student activity accounts, things that the district has to pay, like salary type things, because we have to make sure that we only issue one W-2 to a person. And so we want to pay all of the payroll things through the district account, and then the student activity accounts pay us back. And that's what the credits were in the other objects this month, all repayments from student activity accounts. Overall, our general fund expenditures, we spent 38.36% compared to last year's 38.36 versus 38.63. So we're spot on with where we're normally at with expenditures. Fund 27 revenues, our main sources are categorical aid payment and a Medicaid payment. Other than that, in grants, we don't have a lot of other revenue until the end of the year with our big transfer. Salary and benefits really our main expenditures for Fund 27, and they're right in line with where we expect them to be. Purchase services, again, the bus bills came late, and part of that is special education, so you've got some spending in purchase services for bus bills. Other than that, we're right in line with where we were last year at this time for our expenditures for Fund 27. Nothing that we haven't expected. Fund 43, our only revenue to report until we do our $15 million borrow in March is our interest, and the interest is all booked in the report. Expenditures, payments to Findorf and Bray, which seem to be our typical monthly expenditures in Fund 43 right now. For our health insurance, our self-funded, if you look to the back, we're in really healthy position with our insurance, but again, that always takes a hit come the summer months when teachers are off and taking care of things. So, but we are in a really good position right now and don't have any reason to see that we're going to not end in a good position this year. For our dental that we've added, if you look at our fund balance, we're a little bit below where we started at the beginning of the year, but you have to remember that dental's a little different in that the benefit year goes from January to December versus health is September through August. So you have people at the end of the year taking care of things that, you know, if they have extra money left on their insurance for dental. So we see a little bit of a spike in December and those months. So we expect that that will build back up over the next couple months. Any questions? Concerns?
Anything? No, ma'am.
Okay.
That's good. Alrighty, that concludes our discussion / information item section. Next up is other business. Does anybody have any recommendations for future meetings? Discuss? Alrighty, well, if you do, email Darren or myself, and we will get it agendized. Are we required for a yes? Alrighty, so I'll be looking for a motion for closed session. Excellent. Do you want to read it?
We have to, yeah.
I would move that we would adjourn to executive session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85 1E for deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Les Paul Parking Solution and sale of district property.
Is there a second? Mrs.
second.
Voigt? Guess this will be a roll call.
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. You're good.